Okay, these are your APUSH notes for Monday, September 27th. Yeah, September 27th. You're going to do about 20-30 minutes worth of notes today. The remainder of the notes will come on Tuesday. Remember, the test is still slated for this Wednesday. We should still be on track for that to happen. Chapters 8, 9, 10, and sorry, not 8. Sorry, chapters 9, 10, 11, and 12. 9, 10, 11, 12. Everything from the Constitution and articles and all that, all the way through Monroe and Madison, which we're going to cover in the next 2 days. We might do some writing after the fact, but I don't have any writing prepared for you while I'm out. So you're going to take the notes today on Monday and on Tuesday, and then Wednesday we'll test, and we'll look about doing writing when I get back. Okay. So we talked about these the causes of the lead up to the causes of the war of 1812. So we're looking now at the course of the war. So we talked about how the nation was divided. We talked about how this was considered Mr. Madison's war or the Democratic Republicans' war, and it was controversial at the time. And a lot of Federalists didn't approve of this war, especially because they favored more of a pro-British side versus the Democratic Republicans, and so it was very controversial. So let's talk about how the war goes. So America has a very weak military at the beginning of this war. Both Madison and Jefferson did not want to spend a lot of money on the military in general. And try to keep spending very low. They didn't want to make new ships or expand the military or expand the Navy in the pre-war years, even though we were kind of ramping up to war in the meantime. So Jefferson and Madison had both reduced the size of the military. They tried to keep the spending low and the size of our Navy and Army low. Back in those days, you did not keep a standing army. You only called it up when you needed one, which is kind of what we did in the Revolutionary War. Well, that's going to be a problem at this point whenever the British and the British have a much stronger Navy and Army already built up, and we're having to play catch up, and obviously it takes a very long time to build ships, so it's going to be difficult. So a lot of the pro-war strategists based hopes of victory on a couple things. Number one, they hoped that Napoleon's success in Europe would keep Britain distracted, and that's what a lot of our strategy depended upon, that Napoleon would keep winning around 1812, which he was until he got to Russia around the same time. Napoleon would keep winning the war, and Britain would keep distracted, kind of like they were back during the Revolutionary War. And the other reason is a good U.S. campaign into Canada. Our main focus for our military would be attacking around the Great Lakes area, going into Canada, and hurting the British in that way. So that was our two main chief strategies, was hopefully Napoleon would keep the British distracted, and that we would have a good U.S. campaign, a land campaign into Canada, with some Navy ships on the Great Lakes as well. So our invasion. For our invasion, America decides to launch a three-part attack early in 1812 into Canada. It was fairly unsuccessful. We don't really have any major land battle victories until the Battle of New Orleans in 1815, but throughout most of the war, we don't really get or obtain much territory. We do try to attack Canada a few different times, but our first initial attack, a three-part attack, was unsuccessful in invasion of Canada with very poorly equipped and poorly trained soldiers. And that was another problem too, is that we didn't put our best and brightest forward in terms of leaders and generals. Some of the people who were generals or leaders in the Army were because of their seniority, not because they're the best officers. And so we didn't really have the best and brightest leading us into these battles, and it cost us. And we weren't equipped and prepared to fight this war either, which is begs the question, why are we in this war in the first place? But anyway, so a lot of our land fighting took place around there and did not go successfully. The one bright spot about the war was our naval battles. This is one of the areas that we do kind of look fondly back on the war about, was that we did have some significant victories. Now, we had nothing in the size of ships of what the British had. Like, they have these 70-gun ships, these huge ships, but none of those guys came out to our country at first. They mostly stayed over in Europe to deal with France. So our country was mainly dealing with their medium to smaller ships in the war, and so we had developed some medium-sized ships as well, the most famous of which is the USS Constitution, which is still in Boston Harbor. Excuse me, hang on. Excuse me, couldn't hold it back. Try to. So USS Constitution, which is still in Boston Harbor, fought in the war 1812. Fun fact, it is currently our only active duty naval warship that actually sunk other ships in war, because any other ship's been retired by this point except the Constitution. During this war, it actually gets the nickname Old Ironsides because there was a battle where a British ship fired cannonballs onto the side of the ship, and its live oak hull bounce these balls off the sides. And then somebody made the comment that, you know, it's as if the ship's sides made are iron, so that's where you get the nickname Old Ironsides. Old Ironsides, or the USS Constitution naval ship, got a few significant naval battles throughout. It never lost a naval battle throughout the entire war. There's a few other ships that also won some battles as well too. So our Navy did do a very good job. And our Navy is kind of left open to attack ships at will. A lot of British ships would go after our ships, and we were able to outmaneuver them or outgun them. It wasn't until about a year and a half into the war where the British realized that their Navy was getting made fools of by our ships, and so they started to actually try to treat this more seriously by launching a blockade to block our coastline. But especially early in the war, we did very, very well with our Navy, with multiple ships attacking. We also had the help of American privateers, or pirates. So we also had the help of American privateers as well, like Jean Lafitte, who made money and basically got out of a lot of his criminal record issues because of his help to the U.S. government during the war. So Jean Lafitte, who resided in Louisiana, helped in the war as well. So eventually the British offset any naval gains with their blockade, as we already mentioned, by 1813, 1814. It blocked off the naval coast. Just like the Embargo Act, it's going to completely shut down all our trade, kind of like what you saw back during the Revolutionary War as well. It does help our, our young industries and factories begin to develop more because it restricts trade, but it is very costly and does hurt us by restricting our access out to foreign goods. Then we had a significant battle where we fought at Lake Erie. Advance the slide here. So you can kind of see here on this map on the left, it says this is around the Great Lakes. One very significant battle was the Battle of Lake Erie, which you can see here under where it says Perry, September 1813. Where Captain Oliver Perry, who's a naval captain, helped clear the British out for America's army to get into Canada, led by William Henry Harrison. General William Henry Harrison, we're going to see again. He fought against Tecumseh in the battle against Tippecanoe and all that before the war. He's our main general for the Great Lakes area for a lot of the war, and he's going to become very famous down the line, eventually become actually president. But after we won at the Battle of Lake Erie, a naval battle, it cleared the way for General William Henry Harrison to win an important army battle at the Battle of the Thames, or the Thames, T-H-A-M-E-S River. That successful Battle of the Thames River did stop any kind of important invasion from that was going to happen by the British into New York or New England. So the British were looking to invade us from New York and New England, and that stopped it from happening. So that was important there too. Let's see. Okay, I'm going to have to stop the video here shortly so I can go back. But anyway. All right, so for the Chesapeake campaign, Chesapeake, remember this is like Maryland, Virginia area. The Capitol and the White House got burned during the Chesapeake campaign. They eventually, by 1814, the British have started winding their fighting down with Napoleon, so they decided to launch themselves a land campaign into the Chesapeake. They got past our fortifications there in Virginia and landed in Virginia and marched their way up to Washington, D.C. This is very famously where James Madison and his wife Dolly Madison fled the Capitol, along with all the people in the Capitol as well too, all the congressmen and senators. They left the Capitol. They took the famous painting of George Washington with them, and they took off to Maryland to get away. And then the British soldiers arrived and burned down the Capitol and burned down the White House in retribution against us. And so that was an embarrassment to us. After they attacked the White House and the Capitol, they marched up to Baltimore, where we had a Fort McHenry, that protected Baltimore. You can kind of see that kind of on that map on the right there between Maryland and that Chesapeake area. So anyway, the British got to that fort, and we fought back and forth there for days. There was a famous negotiator who tried to go to negotiate with the British for some prisoner releases. That was Francis Scott Key. While Francis Scott Key was there watching the battle take place at Fort McHenry, the very next morning he saw the flag was still there over the fort, and so he's very inspired. He ended up writing the Star-Spangled Banner in response to all that. But that was a result of the Battle of Fort McHenry in 1814 during the War of 1812. The only bright spot for the Army throughout the entire thing was the Southern campaign for the War of 1812. General Andrew Jackson was able to make a significant dents into the British territories and the Native American help that they got in the South. So the British, kind of like before, got Native American allies, especially out of the Florida area in the South. Jackson was able to attack them sometimes, especially against the Creek Nation, the Creek, C-R-E-E-K Nation. So we won multiple battles against the Native Americans down there. And then at the very end of the war, the British didn't know the war was over, because the British actually, the war technically ended by December of 1814, but the war kept going on because communication was slow. So in January of 1815, Jackson and our American soldiers put up a stand in New Orleans. Very famously, he recruited Creoles and free blacks and all kinds of, our allies from Native Americans, all these different groups to help fight in New Orleans and help fight back against the British in their invasion. And that was our most significant land battle, was actually after the war took place, where we actually stopped the British invasion into New Orleans and stopped their attacks there. So that was also important too. But the war had already been finished. We didn't realize it, even though the battle took place about 3 weeks after the war completed. All right, so the Treaty of Ghent. By the time you get to the fall and after they lose Fort McHenry, the British were basically tired of fighting. They had fought this, they've been fighting for Napoleon forever. They had previously fought with the French and against us, and they're just tired of war. And so after Napoleon was defeated, Napoleon was done, they just basically said, why are we fighting this war with the British? With the Americans, what's the point of this? And so they decided to opt out this war. They began to seek a negotiation of peace after the war, by the fall of 1814. And so by Christmas Eve, we decided to go ahead and sign this Treaty of Ghent, G-H-E-N-T, Ghent, the Treaty of Ghent out of Belgium, which is where the name comes from, Ghent, G-H-E-N-T. We signed it with the British because Madison realized that there could be no decisive victory or win from this war. So we just signed this on Christmas Eve, 1814, about 3 weeks prior to the Battle of Battle of New Orleans, excuse me. The terms did three of the following things. Number one, it halted all fighting, obviously. It halted all fighting in the war. Both sides agreed to stop fighting. Two, it returned all captured and conquered territory. We had conquered some territory in Canada. They had conquered some territory in our Northwest Territories and in New York. And we both agreed to give the lands back. So that was the second part. So all fighting stopped, number one. Number two, all conquered territory went back. There wasn't much of conquering on both sides. And three, we agreed to recognize the pre-war boundaries of America and Canada. So it goes back to how everything was. So three is they recognize the pre-war boundary between the United States and Canada. So essentially this war ends in a stalemate and everything goes back to normal. And it kind of brings up the question why this war happened in the first place. There are some good effects, but that's the end of the war in general, and that's how it all comes about. So that's where we're in the first video here.